Good morning, everybody, and I hope everybody is having a great day. It's Friday. Well, I don't know why I'm so excited, because to me, it doesn't matter what day of the week we're in. I still go and do whatever I got to do 7 days a week, and I take off when I can. And that's the whole thing about creating different types of businesses and thinking outside of the box. So, good morning, Ari. How are you
Good
doing?
morning. I'm just excited, and I know that that's your character. And every time I'm around you, I get excited.
Well, you know what? I believe this. We all have one life to live. And trust me, it's not as if I've lived an easy life. If stuff happens, it's just part of life. And we already have our first viewer that's already in. David is there watching us already. Good morning, David. And I hope you're having a great day. So David's always here quick, because he's always looking to bring himself up, learn extra things. And that's what life is all about. So before we start getting into our program, I want to step back for a second, and I want to tell some people about part of life is learning to think outside the box. And I always say that it's because all of my life, things have come to me. And it's because I don't think in the box. I always have different visions of how things are going to go. And it's all about thinking in a different way. And how do we do that? By really tapping into ourselves. Ari, do you believe in tapping into your own intimate, like these messages that we get?
Yeah, I mean, to me, thinking outside of the box means that you're not thinking the way that everyone expects you to think. So you actually have to learn how to think, and you need to think the way you want to think. Meaning you really need to be able to not care about what other people are thinking, or try to be a little bit different. So yeah, absolutely. I think there's many times in my life where I felt like, what would people think, right, whenever I do something or whatnot. And I learned to stop doing that. I learned to think, I don't mind if people think I'm crazy sometimes, right? At the end of the day, so many successful people thought they were, a lot of people thought they were crazy, and then they ended up being very, very successful. And you have to be a little bit crazy to be successful. So yeah, I believe in that 100%.
So, and it is, like, here's the thing. I'm working on something on the side, which I will be speaking to Ari, and I'm not going to go into any details, but, I'm working actually on a real estate type of deal. And you know what? I have all these different visions of different ways of handling it. So, it's always thinking outside the box. It's even before Ari and I got together on this, I already thought of another way of dealing in real estate. So I want you, when you're listening to this, it's not just always about real estate, although I love real estate and I've made a lot of great money through real estate. And that's one of my areas. But let's talk about even the fact of, if we think outside the box, we can actually add so much into our lives in a different way. So stop thinking that there's only one way to do things. Like real estate, there was some point in my life, well, it was a new point. It was part of the time when I was restarting life again, and I didn't know what to do with myself. I had been I've worked in very many different industries, and I left a major industry that I was working with because that was my ex's business. And it was time to recreate myself yet again. And it was all about trying to think. And I tried different ways. And something told me I didn't want to go and get a real estate license. And I decided that I was going to start looking into investing. And I started taking courses and learning. And that's when, I actually got into doing a lot of that. And I flipped and I And I did all sorts of things, took a house from a single family dwelling and made it into a duplex, rented it out for a number of years, made great money. And that's actually where I met Ari. But it's all about thinking in different ways. So if you're watching this, and if you're even in a business, because that's part of, even what I do is one of my other specialty areas is helping you think of how to recreate your business. And whether it is Ari is a broker and a realtor, I can do this. But the other part is he's also now going into coaching, and that's part of, becoming online. And that's where him and I will be working together to bring that into a new segment as well for him. So stop thinking that there's only one or two ways to deal things. There's all different ways of creating money into your life. Now, with that being said, we are going to start talking real estate, because whoever is tuning into watching this was because they don't want to hear me going to local anymore, because that's what I do so well. So let's start on our Friday show today. We're going to look at things because, people start, and I heard it this week when I was working with somebody. They said to me, actually, it comes down to real estate. They said to me, I just can't afford it. And I started looking and I said, well, I don't know if you can afford it or you can't afford it. I don't think you're looking at it well enough, because there's all sorts of ways that I'm thinking where you can, because as I said, nothing is black and white. There's all different ways of managing how to afford a property. And, whether this is your first property or possibly even wanting to go in and become an investor and take a property and bring it more. So let's start at the very beginning, Ari, is how do we go in and teach people, or to think about how much can you afford when you're looking at maybe calculating how much you can afford on spending on a house. And that really depends on where we'll have to look into a monthly basis.
Okay, so before we even go there, that's the wrong question, right? Or sorry, statement. I can't afford it. So, you can buy a house. Anyone can buy a house. Even if you don't go and buy it today, you can buy a house in your head. If you buy a house, you just have to do all the right things. If you believe that this is what you want, you have to, it's all about goals, right? So, I mean, even my own first experience in buying a property, it starts with a thought, right? So if you can think that you're going to have a house, you need to picture that house. You need to get emotional about it.
Totally.
And everything just comes together. Okay. Now I know it sounds like, hey, what is this guy talking about? But it's so true, right? You basically start looking at your finances. You start changing your lifestyle a little bit. But if you really want it and you're emotionally involved in that goal, you will get a house. Okay. So that's number one. Number two, we've talked about this in the last session, which was, changing that lifestyle, right? Looking at what you're making, setting up certain goals to either save or look at different programs. Way to go, David. Look at different programs, right? Like first things first, you have to go talk to a mortgage broker. Here's a really simple way of looking at it, and I'm sure everybody would agree, right? So that saying, or when people say, like looking back, I can connect the dots. Well, you can't connect the dots looking forward, right? You can't connect the dots looking forward. But what you need to do is you need to basically try to look as forward as possible and build something. So I'll give you an example. I'm sure that, pre-construction, you go to a builder's website or you go to their center, right? Where they show you a plan. They even show you a miniature version of a house. They have a lot of the times they have a model home, right? You can go into the model home. You can look at it exactly what it's going to look like. So the builders, they already have everything done. The drawings, the architecture, they know where everything's going to be. They have the site. So they start backwards. They connect the dots backwards. And you got to do the same thing with your own, not just life. You have to do the same thing with real estate. Like when I start working with a client, we don't just say, okay, well, you know what? Let's just get in the car and drive. right? No, we do everything the other way around. We start with getting a mortgage, right? Seeing what you can afford, looking at the areas, research, right? But ultimately, we know this stuff because of the research, but also because of the goal, right? So if you first things first, you have to start with the goal. So the next thing is you have to obviously get an understanding of your financial situation. And one of the best ways of doing that is what we do is we send our, I'd say like, people that are not really clients yet. Like, so if somebody calls me and says, look, I want to set up a goal. I want to buy a house. I don't know what I can afford. First things first is we have a little spreadsheet that, I mean, unless you have it, it kind of helps you with all your expenses. Gives you an idea of what your monthly income is, what your monthly income is. But when you punch all these numbers in, you're able to kind of get an understanding of where you are. Now that number is also important because you'll need it for the mortgage broker. And that's the next step. The mortgage broker will kind of analyze your situation. So it's not like you're going to a mortgage broker just to apply, right? The guys I work with, they'll sit down with you, they'll, and it doesn't have to be even face to face, they can do it over a call. They'll punch in all your information for you. That's how easy it is. You call them, you say, here's how much I make, here's my expenses, here's my debts, right? And there's two things that they'll go over. And this is in the background. It's gross, like it's TDSR, so total debt service ratio, and gross debt service ratio. There's two different things that they look at, which I think we're gonna talk about later, right? So, once they analyze your situation, they'll immediately be able to tell you where you're at. They'll tell you, what you need. Also, they'll tell you if there's any programs that you can buy with, like, for example, first time buyer, 5%, right, as a down payment. So they'll go over all that stuff with you. But again, even if you're not able to buy today, if in your mind you've already, committed to buying something, you'll have a clearer picture on what you can buy or what you're going to buy in the future, right? So that's the first step. That's what I would say would be the first step is getting almost like, like taking accounting of your situation.
But it all starts also when we say this, because I do this. This is exactly how I do this, even with coaching, because my entire life has happened to me. Things I've had incredible, I call them miracles. And it's, when we always start with the end goal, because like Ari says, we can't do the dots back or from what we've done. But what we can do is we start with an end goal and knowing that you want to buy something, starting to figure out, what is the thing that you're desiring, what type of a property. And when you start to making that a much clearer picture, then also Ari can work it through, or any realtor. We're here to give you information, and you can find somebody who will work in your area. But the whole idea is starting from that picture, figuring out what are the things that you need and you want, and start picturing that. You know what? I live in a condo now that was actually on a vision board that I did over 10 years ago. And I'm in it now. It's kind of really weird, but things that I have envisioned have actually come to life. So if you tell yourself you can't afford it, you're right. You're not going to be able to afford it. But the tweaking through changing certain things in your life, learning how to pay off certain debts and ways of paying off, and even if it is to amalgamate all your debts into one to help you pay it off, will actually move you into a different goal, into a different area of your thing. So it will make things happen. And you work through your even bringing up your credit rating, because that also affects everything as well. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So like the credit rating is also a big part of it, right? So it determines whether you go to a regular lender or to a B lender. I believe if the credit score is under 600, then it's a B lender. And then also if you're at the very top of the credit score, which I think is closer to 900, you have more options available to you, right? So yeah.
And that's also a way we think outside the box, because, when you go to someone, we don't know what we don't know. But if you can sit back and listen to someone as they're talking and explaining things, with an open mind. And here's another thing. Here's something that we don't do now. We sit and we listen and we talk to people, and then we have this phone that we're not focusing on our conversation that we're in. So we need to learn. And it's funny because last week, for whatever reason, I felt the need that I had to come back and listen to Eckhart Tolle in the presence of now. And it's so important because we don't live in the now moment. You know, as here, you and I are here, we're now, we're listening, we're talking. When people I see when they're in meetings, they're not there. And if you're not there, you're not going to pick up on some of the key things that you need to figure out for yourself. And it's those things that bring in ideas into your own mind. So we have to learn to be present. So put down the phones, even if you're watching this now, stop multitasking and start listening, because that's when ideas are going to come to you. And I only say this out of total respect for people, because for me, it's all about helping others. And for Ari, it's the exact same thing. So let's go over how continue on about now you've gone in and you're working on whether you can work with a B lender or an A lender or whatever. Who can help you find these lenders?
Yeah, so I mean, we obviously we have selected vendors that we've worked with in the past, and we do this by experience, right? So we start out by trying certain lenders to see if they're good at what they do, and I'll explain to you what I mean. So first of all, let's talk about the types of lenders. So for example, when I say lenders, you can go to TD Bank, you can go to Scotiabank, you can go to RBC, and I'm not knocking the banks or going there directly, but here's the difference. Okay, so there's those type of lenders which are 9 to 5 typically, and they work for the bank directly, and then there's mortgage brokers that are mobile. Now, when I say mortgage brokers, there's also two types of mortgage brokers. There's certain mortgage brokers that work specifically for the bank. So, for example, there's a Scotiabank mobile mortgage broker. So he's not or she's not 9 to 5 in the bank, right? They're mobile. They work basically like a self-employed person, right? But they can only deal with Scotiabank, right? They can't get you into CIBC or RBC or anything else. Okay, so those are the mobile specialists, and then there is the I guess the other scope of things, which is like an actual mortgage broker, and they don't work for any of the major banks. They work for almost like an umbrella, and so what they can do is you could give them your information, same thing as you'd give the other two, and they can shop around, so they can submit your application. So basically, they only have to do one application. They don't have to do one for each bank. So they take your application and then they shop around with they can go to Scotiabank, they can go to Royal Bank, they can go to any bank. They can get you the best loans in terms of terms. They can shop around or look for the best rate. And mind you, that's not always the best thing for you, right? Like there's also benefits that certain mortgage banks or companies have that are better for you versus just getting the lowest and cheapest rate, right? And I'll touch on that in a sec. But what I would say is that the first things, I usually don't really recommend my clients going directly to the bank because they only work till 5 typically, right? Maybe 6. And don't get me wrong, they're great. They're great people. Like, in fact, I'm, for example, I'm in the process myself of also making some moves, right? And I'm porting my mortgage, meaning I'm taking the current mortgage that I have and I'm trying to move it to a new house. That's one of the privileges that I have with my mortgage company, which is Scotiabank, right? So they're great. The issue with that is that I can't go to a broker, right? I have to go directly to my bank because technically speaking, I'm not getting a new mortgage. I'm just moving my mortgage from one property to the other. And so I'm dealing with Scotiabank directly, and to give you an example, like I can't, like, not again, they're just normal people. I'm not knocking them, but like I can't talk to them on the weekends, right? Or certain times of the day, right? Not that I need to, but if I was getting a new mortgage and I needed to ask questions, or maybe there was some documents that my real estate agent or my lawyer needed to get, you won't be able to get it say at 6 o'clock in the evening or 7 o'clock in the evening. And if your deal closes in the morning the next day, you're in crunch time, right? So you kind of want to deal with, in my opinion, either a mortgage broker or a mobile specialist that works directly for that bank. So if you're with Scotia and you just want to go to Scotia, you don't want to go to anywhere else, that's fine. Then you need to find a mortgage broker that is mobile, like self-employed, that's, basically like me, right? Like you can get me at 9 o'clock at night if you need to. And that's kind of what I recommend, right? So, sorry, go ahead.
So what I was going to say, now we're talking about mortgages that are portable, but let me tell you something. Not all mortgages are portable.
That's right.
That's another thing that you need to understand and know, that when you're shopping around, if you don't know and you're shopping with somebody who really doesn't understand these type of things, not all mortgages are created equal. And especially when it comes to portability of taking a mortgage from one property to another. So these are very important questions when you're looking for a mortgage and shopping. And a lot of times these banks will not allow you to move from one, because a lot of times when you're working with the bank directly, they're very black and white.
That's right. Yeah. And so I'll touch on that as well, right? So it's not just porting, right? There's prepayment privileges, right? So to give you an example, right, I could pay off 10% of my mortgage per year. So if I had extra money, I could pay that off, right? So to give you an example, when the interest rate was at 2%, it wasn't really like the best idea to pay off your mortgage quicker, because the interest rate is so low, you're paying most of your principal balance. Where now the interest rate is like 5%. So if you're on a variable mortgage and you're paying a high mortgage, then yeah, you want to prepay it. So for somebody who's looking to buy real estate, doesn't know what this means, it just means that you can actually pay up your mortgage. You can pay it down faster. You can ask your bank to like increase your payment. So say, for example, if your mortgage is $2,500, you can say, I want to pay an extra $500 a month. And that kind of goes right towards your principal. So instead of, you'd be surprised, like let's say you're on a term. So, and we'll talk about that. So there's different terms, right? So 25 or 30-year mortgage, right? You cut that down by a lot, like many, many years, just by paying an extra few $100 a month, right? And again, that's something that the mortgage broker can actually show you. Yeah, so that's the other thing that's important is what kind of terms are you getting for your mortgage, right? Like prepayment terms, porting your mortgage. That's what we call it, right? So what I'm doing is moving my mortgage from one place to another. That's porting your mortgage.
And why is that important to?
It's very important because, say, for example, okay, so I have to explain this before I can explain what porting means. So typically there's two types of situations, right? And it depends on the person. So there is a fixed mortgage and then there is a variable mortgage, right? So a fixed mortgage is for someone who feels that they just want to know what they're going to be paying every month for the next, and they can choose, right? They can go 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 4 years, right? So typically people, they fix their mortgage for 5 years. Now I'll explain to you what that means. And I'll use myself as an example, right? So about a year ago, when the rate was actually 1.97 or something like that, I called my bank and I said, you know what? I want to lock it in. And I locked it in for 4 years. So I have right now 3 years left and I'm still paying at 1.9% mortgage. Okay, so for the next 3 years, my interest rate will not change. So whatever payments I'm making, and because it's such a low mortgage interest rate, the majority of the payment that I'm making is going towards principal instead of just paying off interest, right? So say, for example, same situation, but I was on a variable mortgage, which is the interest rate fluctuates based on the bank, based on, also the lending interest rate for Bank of Canada, right? They talk about this on the news all the time, right? So right now we have, we've had like, three big increases this year. And I think, again, I'm not, I don't have the daily mortgage rates. A mortgage broker would know, and I could reach out, but I think it's about 5%, just over
Okay.
5%.
Yeah.
So imagine, you bought a property in the last 12 months, right? When it was like 2%. And now your mortgage went up to 5% because you didn't lock it in, right? You were on a variable interest rate, right? Now, mind you, for the longest time, that variable rate, and it still is, usually it's lower than a fixed rate. So if you were right now comparing two different rates, the variable rate is still lower than the fixed rate, right? It costs you more to lock in for 5 years, right? So the variable rate, let's say if it's 5% right now, the fixed rate could be 5.5 or 6%, but that means you're fixing it for 5 years, right? That's why it's more expensive. Now it makes sense when the rate was only 2%, right? To fix your rate for 5 years or whatnot. But in this case, if you were on a variable rate and you didn't lock it in when the rate was going up, you could be right now having a bit of a tough time, right? And I'm seeing this happen quite a bit. Like I'm seeing, like people that purchased, and like they were paying, let's say $2,700 a month, and all of a sudden now their payment is like $5,000 a month.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the difference between variable and fixed. Right. And so that when it comes to porting, that's very important, because if you're on a fixed, like I am, if you're on a fixed mortgage, so I'm at 2%, let's say, right? If I want to move my mortgage to another property, I keep that 2%.
Absolutely.
I don't have to pay more. Right. So that's the beauty of it. Now, if I was to say, for example, buy a property that's more expensive, and I needed to add let's say another $100,000. So what they would do is they would blend my rate and the new rate, right? So I would get kind of like the middle ground of those rates for that extra 100,000. You see what I mean? And again, these are all like details, and I typically tend to tell my clients, like, I can give you the basic information, but I don't want to get into the real details, because it's like I'm a professional with real estate when it comes to buying homes. I know a lot of stuff about that, contracts. I always say it's always good to talk to the mortgage broker, because they'll be able to give you real numbers and tell you exactly what it's going to be, so that you know exactly what you're looking at. But yeah, that is the some of the things that you really have to consider when you're getting a mortgage. One more thing I want to mention too is if you do fix your mortgage, let's say you sell your home, but you don't port it and you just want to get out and cash out, and you do it before the 5-year term, there's a penalty that you would have to pay, and it's pretty hefty. So that's another thing that you want to also figure out. Like I know, I think it's CIBC. They were actually, their penalties is very high, right? So the different banks have different penalties for different amounts, and that's another thing you want to look at as well.
So when we're giving you all this information, I don't want you to get overpowered by it all. But when you become aware, this is the whole thing. If you're watching this and you're really focusing on what we're saying, the whole idea is, when you sort of have somewhat of an understanding, you don't need to have all the itty bitty details. But when you're sitting down with your realtor, your broker, or even a mortgage broker, you can actually, some things will come to your head, because you'll kind of, something as they're talking, you'll start looking, oh, right. Well, then all of a sudden a thing will come to you of saying, wow, can I take this mortgage with me? I know there's different avenues. You'll have more of an idea of the right questions to be asking. And that's what it is about learning to live outside the box. It's not about knowing everything. It's being able to be asking the right questions. Somebody that you're working with will help you to understand all this if they have been in real estate long enough and really understand what's going on in there. They've been around so that they've seen a lot of things happening. But it's also having yourself, because you know what, if there's a lot of people that cut corners today. We're in a very world where it's a very fast paced world. And you need to be working with someone who's going to actually have the time to sit down with you and focus on all your things. Like Ari's talking about knowing what your costs are, knowing what your debts are, and what you can afford. And when we go through that, now, you said, Ari, you have a spreadsheet that you give out to your clients.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody wants to have that spreadsheet,
Yeah.
Will you be able to pass that along?
Yeah. And you know what? I wanted to mention this too. If you go to my website, there's a section where it's under tools. And there's a ton of information that I actually put together, not just, about how to buy and whatnot, but it actually gives you examples, like a real example of like what affordability is based on somebody's situation. So if you go on there, it'll kind of tell you, so to give you an example, like David earns 40,000. I'm looking at it right now. David earns $40,000, and his partner Ruth earns 43,000. They have a car payment of 350. So it breaks down into like their expenses, and it almost shows you, a real life example on what they would be approved for, right? So you can kind of look at that as well.
Can you, sorry to interrupt, can you in the chat here just put in your website here, and I can put it up on the screen so people can see where they can go and get this information? Because here's the thing, remember what I just said, the more you're exposed, the more things that you read about, understand about, and you don't have to understand 100%, but the better questions you're going to be asked.
I sent it to you just now in the chat.
Okay.
I don't know if you see it.
Yeah. Give me just a second. Okay, keep going. Keep going.
There it is.
Yeah. So go there, look at, and all of our websites we give, and even myself as well, there's a lot of free information when you're around. I understand people say, well, everybody wants to have, like, people are afraid to go in and even do shopping for a broker because they're afraid that they will have to be committed to that broker.
But they should be afraid, and I'll tell you why. So like I'll use a Home Depot example, right? So from time to time, I tend to think that I can do some DIY. I try to do like these little projects that I end up getting very frustrated with. But hey, you know what? I try to be creative, right? So I'll go into Home Depot and I'll walk through the aisles, and I see somebody that works there, and I tell them, here's what I want to do, and I show them a picture and everything, right? One guy would say, no, you can't do that. Okay, then I walk to another aisle. I show the same picture, and I say the same thing to another guy, and he's like, yep, you just got to get this, and that. So same thing, like you said. I think not just in real estate, mortgage brokers, almost in any business or industry, there's people that they don't have a vision, and then there's people that do have a vision. There's people that will look at what you want and help you get there, and they'll help you by being creative and trying to find ways to do it. And then there's people that will say, no, you can't do it. And it happens to me all the time. I just learned to stop listening to the people that say no. If I hear somebody saying no, I just move on and look for somebody else. Right. So
it is. It's everything in life. It's asking the right questions. It's listening to the people that have done it. Stop following and listening to the people. You know what? I say that even in the normal world where you have people around you and they're being so critical of what you can or can't do, and they want to know everything what you're doing in your life, but they've never done it, and they're giving you opinions. So we got to learn that why would you take the opinion of someone who's never done something, who isn't doing it, that doesn't have the results from the person who you know? Like, choose wisely who you're going to be being mentored by.
Surrounded with, yeah.
Right. Surround yourself with those people that are, or if you can't find where you need to find. So I would like for myself, when I need to find something, I will go to a person who is doing it. Maybe like I would go to Ari, and instead of going and let's say I'm looking for mortgage brokers and I'm just doing my shopping around, I will go to people that are successful in that area and ask them. Here's the thing. Most people are thrilled to help. People say all the time to me, well, why do you do that? Why will you give yourself, you give me coaching and do some things for free? It's because I want to help others. And I know that Ari and I connect because we both have that same mentality that we're looking to help others. It's all about improving. Well, for me, I love to improve other people's lives because I can make a difference in somebody else's life. So that makes them more successful. The more successful people there are, the better world we're going to have. So it's all about looking who you're asking about information.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're asking somebody who has a positive mindset, not a fear-based mindset. And if they have a fear-based mindset, then because they can't do it or they don't think they can do it, then they'll say that why would they tell you that you can do it, right?
So you know what, and people don't understand when I say that everything is mindset in your life. If you are afraid, and fear is, I actually wrote a post yesterday about fear, and fear is good to a certain extent because it warns us maybe we're in danger, so we feel a certain way. But then there's times when fear actually holds us back. And when that fear holds us back from doing something, because let's face it, it's scary. I remember the first house I ever bought. I was worried. How am I going to be able to afford it? How I'll never have a life again. I'll never be able to go out to eat again. And here's the thing. You know what? Once you get into it and you start moving forward because you got the proper advice, you didn't get into a property that was or into anything that's over your head that you really can't afford because you are involved with the right people, all of a sudden life doesn't turn into being that all of a sudden you're not living that life. And that's why we're here, is to share with you these points and things, is to allow you to live in a life where you are not living where your health is at risk. Because when we become over fearful, it can affect us also in our emotions, in our whole physiology. So we have to learn, about stepping into fear, because you don't grow unless you go into that discomfort area. But the other thing is you don't learn and you don't grow if you don't jump. So, Ari, how do we move forward when we are so maybe in we're stuck in, and maybe an area in life where maybe we're oversaturated in debt, and we don't know which way we should be going and all of the rest of that. How can we move forward so that we can start to move forward to possibly afford a house?
Rewrite the program. Don't think about the debt. Don't think about any of this stuff, because if you do that, you're just going to continue to think about it, and you'll continue to attract it. What I would suggest is, find a different way. Talk to people that have done it. Start with, again, talking to people that are able to get out of that, I guess, the debt situation, right? There's many ways. There's financial advisors, right? They can help you get out of that. essentially, again, going back to what I said earlier, I would say that, take accounting of your situation. Like that's the best thing you can do is break down everything that you have, and you'll see where things are. I don't want to say going wrong. I would say more of where you need to make certain small changes, because that's all it is. I remember. So I'll open up with you, right? So like I remember I think I had a $30,000 debt, and I was renting an apartment, and I made the decision that I'm going to buy a house. That was it, right? And I looked at I literally exported my bank account for the last 3 months to an Excel sheet, and I couldn't believe that I'm spending like $100 and something on coffee every month, right? Like and that
Right.
was just one little thing. So I started making coffee at home, and I saved that money, right? So it took me. I think a funny thing is because I was. So I guess that's the other thing. It depends how emotionally, and I say emotionally, like because you have to. If you want something, it's how emotional you are about it. Everybody wants something, right? Everybody wants to go to the gym and get a six pack. But if you're not emotionally, set on it, if there's no reason for you to actually go and do it, then there's a good chance you're not going to. And so for me, within a year, not only did I pay that off, but I also was able to get myself in a situation where I bought a house, right? And so that was from that point I learned my lesson. And then I've always started using as basically money is time. That was my metaphor, right? The more money you have in the bank, the more time you have to pay your expenses, especially when you own a house, right? So if you have certain amount of money, let's say, okay, so let's say you have $50,000 saved up now, and your expenses say 10,000 a month, which is very high, but that's 5 months of basically not working, not making another penny, and you can live for 5 months. So that was my calculation of freedom, right? It's not about money, right? I mean, money is a tool, but it was for me, it was the end. It was like the thing after whatever money could give me. Some people, they want to buy something with their money, and for them that's their success. Success is measured differently.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the mindset. It's like, it always goes back to the mindset, and it always goes back to how powerful that idea is. And when I say powerful, it's how much emotion do you have behind it, right? And
And it's true because you can't do anything unless you put that emotion into it.
yeah,
Because, your dreams don't come true because you're going, yeah, or whatever. The whole idea of it is you knowing that you want it. You knowing that you want to create a different life for yourself. How much do you really want it? How much can you make changes? Well, changes are really not that difficult. And you don't have to make changes all at once. The whole idea is the fact of creating again your end goal and then figuring out what's the first step that you can make. And that can be something, again, by talking to someone. If you're totally clueless, but let me tell you, you're not, because somehow that very first step. And that's what I do. I help you figure out what your first step is if you don't know, and lead you there towards it. But you figuring out what your first step is, the more you understand yourself, the more power you're going to have.
and I just want to mention one more thing. So this is again from experience, right? So it's not easy, like changing your situation and saving up for a house and getting in the market. Sometimes it could take 1 year, sometimes it could take 5 years. I've worked with people that they started out, so I met them because they needed a place to rent, and I guess they were motivated based on our conversations, and they said, you know what, I want to own. And it took them a few years. And so I work with people that they don't, not necessarily, like, I won't turn you away if you call me and you say, I want to buy, and then we find out you can't buy today, right? My business is built on relationships, and whatever the person's goal is, that's what we stick to. And if it's a 3-year goal, we do that. I've helped people that came to me, and so they were looking to buy, they couldn't buy because this is actually a really good one. This is a really good story. I'm not going to get into the story, but basically they wanted to buy really bad. Okay. We tried to get them approved. They couldn't. And I don't typically promote this because, and I'll tell you what it is in a sec, because there's a lot of like other, I guess, like issues that can come up. But we were able to get them on a rent to own program. Okay, now
Yes.
I don't like them because there's a lot of minefields. Like you could basically like end up paying a lot of money for nothing at the end. But they were, like I said, they were very motivated, emotionally motivated, and they stuck to it. And I think it was like 3 or 4 years later, they called me and they were like you did, and I don't care about credit, but they were so happy that they transferred title to their name on that property, right? So it was a hard journey because remember, like I know people might not understand this, but like they were basically paying rent as if it was market value, plus they were paying a little bit more every month to add towards a down payment and to wait while their credit gets repaired, because that was one of the issues. And so my point that I want to make is that you know I guess like it's not easy, and a lot of times you feel like, yeah, this is just too hard, so you kind of you turn away. But these people didn't turn away, and the bigger the hardship is, I find that at the end of the day, the bigger the reward is, right? So if you turn away, it just means that maybe you're not ready for it. But if you want something, you can do it, right? You just have to stick to it. And if it takes like a year or 5 years, as long as you're committed, you'll get it done.
And I'm so glad you talked about rent to own, because there are so many options in real estate of buying a house. And excuse me, and never mind just buying the house, but they're even like, if you can't afford if you can't afford payments, and possibly you bought a house that has maybe two entrances, and you could close off an area and build an apartment, and you could take that apartment, rent it out. In the meantime, rent it out to somebody, and that could be the rent of that could pay for a mortgage. There's so many ways of
Or approval, Glenda, right? Like, so you
Yes.
can't get approved on your own, but if you can find something, like we do this all the time, we'll find a property that has a legal basement apartment, and then we pitch it to the bank. Well, the mortgage broker pitches it to the bank as an extra income, and
Yeah.
it's subsidizing it. Once you get in there, you now have that property. Now, mind you, say 5 years later, you decide that you want to convert that back into like a single family home. As long as you can afford the payments, who cares, right? You can do it. It's your choice.
But here's the other thing. You might love the fact that life has become so much easier
Easy.
because
Yeah.
you have somebody who's paying your mortgage, that what you can do at that point in time is you've probably at that point have created some equity into your property, and could take that equity you do and buy another house and rent it out, and it pays for itself all over again, or plus some.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about, of thinking outside the box. It can change your entire life, and that is what the goals are. Wouldn't it be nice to have a life where you don't worry about where things are going to go? Because I know so many people say, well, I can't do that because I just can't afford it. Well, if you can't afford it and you're thinking those ways, then you won't be able to afford it. But if you started thinking into yourself, how can I afford it? Where can I make changes? And then you start talking to somebody like Ari, possibly like myself. And then you start thinking outside. If you're looking even for a house and you haven't bought in that home, look for a home that maybe has two entrances. When I was buying houses for investment purposes, that's all I looked at, was homes that had another entrance, because I knew that it would cost me $20,000 to $30,000 just to put in, dig down and put in another entrance into the back or somewhere else around the property. I knew I didn't have an exact cost, but I knew it would cost me an extra $20,000 to $30,000 just to put in a separate entranceway. So I would have that in mind, because maybe I would find a property that was cheap enough that it was worth that I would put that type of money into. Or maybe if I only look at properties, once you're looking, you never know what comes your way. But once you start looking out there for that, then you know that that is an option that will actually change the way that you can afford to buy a property. It's how you look at things that counts.
Yeah, just ask my son if he wants something, he'll get it. Like you could say no, you could say whatever you want. If he wants something, he looks at it as if he's already got it. Right? Try saying no to him. So that's kind of how I actually learned from him when it comes to that. I noticed, that you got to be like that in life. Like if you want something, don't take no for an answer.
Well, it's okay. We'll talk about another thing. When my kids taught me of that, I had to parent different ways because my son was a very, he was really a child who had a lot of focus. He could hear things out, and he was a very compassionate soul. He was a listener. So I could say no and tell him my reason why. My daughter couldn't do that. If I told her no offside of the bat, we were already into temper tantrum. It didn't work. So all of a sudden it was like I couldn't deal with temper tantrum. So I had to learn to explain my reasonings and then give my answer. And that way I was able to do that. So that's when I started looking at things differently. The same thing as when I would say, you know what, and people have heard this who have been following me, when I would say to my children, if it's life-threatening, if it's going to, my decision will be no, and if it's going to hurt you, it will stay at no. However, if it isn't life-threatening and you can change my mind by convincing me why I should change my mind, then I'll think about it and I'll change it. Now, 90% of the time, I change my mind because I realized they would come with explaining the reasons why it was important to them. So really, nothing is set in stone. Even if you come down and you have, let's say you're looking to sell your property and you have somebody that comes to you, you have different offers that come to you. When you sit down and you talk even to your people that maybe have an offer, if you can think of it in a different way, you can sometimes save an offer that might be even out the door by learning to think in a different way and actually bring out that offer back to them differently.
Don't get me started on that. I mean, there's so many times that
Yeah.
I was representing the seller and, like we weren't getting offers. And I called the agent, I started a conversation. One thing led to another. The agent took the client back to the property. All of a sudden, they're interested. And this was from somebody who wasn't even planning on putting an offer. They make an offer and we get the deal done, right? There's so many situations where like the I don't even know if you call it skill. Again, it's that mentality. It's like if you think you can do something, you can. If you can't, you don't think you can do something, it won't happen. And like a lot of opportunities, just sometimes, they come out of thin air, right? Or like just from a thought or an idea, right? And then all of a sudden, you have an offer and you sold your house, and sometimes the same thing happens, and you create a bidding war. You get one offer, you call the other agent. The other agent says, well, it's like, well, my client's offer is not very, I'm pretty sure your client won't take that offer. So that agent, for example, doesn't want to send the offer because he thinks it's too low.
Yeah.
You encourage the agent, say, you know what, we'll look at it, send it. You never know. Meanwhile, they send you an offer and now you have a bidding war. And when you spark a bidding war, all of a sudden that other guy might be like, hey, I really want this place now, and they're willing to pay a little bit more, right? I mean, it depends, the situation depends how you think, but like it all goes back to the beginning of what you said. You got to think outside of that box. You can't think like everybody else.
And you can't be negative. When you know that something is possible, get excited about it, feel it, know it. Because when you start having that excitement, that's when you start thinking outside. It shifts your thinking. And that's the whole thing. Selling one of my properties years ago, I wanted to have a bidding war. I believed in it at the time. One of the agents that I was looking at, I actually interviewed 3 people to sell my property. And I heard how they were talking. You know, I had one guy come to me. He was very known in the area. And he said, no, I definitely recommend you don't do a bidding war. Okay, well, you know what? I knew in my heart that was the way I was going to do it. That was the way I was going to sell my property. I connected up with another agent, and he was on the same page as me. It was how we priced the offer. And the same thing, somebody came to me and they had an offer, but they said they weren't going to. I said, send it in. You know what? That offer was a little lower than my other offers, but it was totally clean. There was nothing about it. It was perfect. And what happened? I accepted that because it meant that everything was going to happen because I already had other plans, other things that I needed to move on. I didn't want to be sitting and playing with all these other offers. So a clean offer sometimes, even if it's a little lower, can actually be the key offer.
And just to add to that, clean means no financing, no inspection, no conditions. Basically, there are certain conditions that protect the buyer, like for example, that all the appliances are in good working order, but those are not deal breakers. Meaning the buyer can't say tomorrow after they agree to this offer that they can back out. Financing, they can back out. Inspection, they do the inspection. They don't like something, they can back out. So clean
But
offer.
hold on, I'm going to interrupt you one
Yeah.
more second. If you are a seller, if you want that inspection thing to be not a problem, have your property inspected before you go to sell. Because, and again, if you can make things easier in your selling, that changes everything. Because if it's already there that somebody can see, if there's a problem, you can actually fix something that could actually cause an offer to fall apart. So many little tidbits here, right?
Lots and lots.
So this is what this is all about. We're getting to the end of our hour, and I'm hoping that whoever is watching this, or if this is on repeat, please hashtag repeat. Let us know that if you've gotten something out of this. There's been a lot of golden nuggets here from me, from Ari. Like, this is what it's all about. We want to be here to educate you. We want to be here so to make you start thinking in a different way and actually allowing you to believe, to listen, to believe that you can do it, because you can. You know what? I've done things all by myself without having a partner, and it's crazy how well I've done. Scared, but still gone through it. And that's what it's all about. And we're here to help you. So if you are looking to move forward and need some type of advice, and you're looking to get a broker to getting yourself go, this is Ari's his website. Go look at the free things that are on there. Educate yourself more. Reach out. Speak to him. No matter what, we're here, him and I, to help you move you to the next level. Stop should-haves in your life. Should-haves are the only things that will get you nowhere. Start moving it. We're here to help you to get out of that comfort zone.
There's
Any
no,
last?
yeah, sorry.
Sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say there's no silly questions either. If you can call me anytime if you have anything you want to ask, or even if you want to kind of get an idea of what's happening in the market, just give me a call.
Or you just want to have a little bit of insight about real estate, give him a call. He's a great guy and he'll speak to you. And even, you know what? If you're really starting to get serious, then make a time and go in and sit down and learn, what do you need to know for moving forward? That's all it takes. What do you need to know? This is Glenda Kroll signing off. And Ari?
Ari Bazillo signing off.
And one other last thing. Give us one little nugget left before we end up leaving our show for today.
Give us a nugget? You put me on the spot here. Real estate nugget?
Any nugget in life.
Any nugget. Okay. Well, I would say take actions. Don't sit and wait. Like everything just starts with something. You got to just start. You got to just get up and you got to just make a move. Don't think about it. Pick up the phone, stand up. I have a standing desk. So when I feel like I'm stale, I just, I jack it up and I stand up and then I feel different, looking at things from a different perspective or just getting things rolling always works. So that's
Oh,
my nugget of the day.
I love it. And it's a golden nugget because I feel the exact same way. Have an awesome weekend, everybody. And remember, it's all about thinking outside of the box. Thanks for joining us today. And let's talk real estate. We're always here to talk about anything. Have a
Have a good
great
weekend.
day. Bye for now.